During the 19th century, national maps and atlases helped South American governments to naturalize ideas about national and territorial coherence in a scientific and symbolic way, and to legitimize territorial desires over disputed regions. In Colombian schools, we used to see maps, logo maps, that show naturalized borderlines containing a national history. Like this map of a textbook showing a Spanish conquistador routes over a nowadays-looking map. But we also learned that our country has lost huge territories, like Panama and Amazon regions. So we can also find maps contrasting current borderlines with big old ones, like the 1889 map. What we don't learn is that big old borderlines are a late 19th century construction, that Colombia may have grown if we compare its actual size and shape with an 1847 New Granada map, the former name of actual Colombia. More interesting perhaps is to realize that Ecuadorians and Peruvians have also learned from school that their country used the same Amazonian territories that Colombia claimed to have lost. So, all big borderlines between Colombia, Ecuador and Peru overlap, just like Bolivian, Peruvian and Brazilian Amazonian claims in the late 19th century maps. This presentation will attempt to answer from a regional perspective how and why we come to have these overlapping national maps on the Amazon regions. Three historical processes are identified for the explanation. 1. The inheritance of the Spanish-Portuguese treaties and differentiated attitudes toward the Amazon regions. 2. The mid-19th century geopolitical shift in the Andean countries for nationalization of the Amazon regions. And 3. The rubber boom, the rubber wars, and the stabilizations of borderlines. One. Newly independent South American states inherited tensions and geographic uncertainty relying on former Portuguese-Spanish border treaties. They inherited as well the different attitudes between Spain and Portugal towards the Amazonian region. Aimed to resolve clashes between the two empires in South America, treaties such as Tordesillas in 1493, orange line in the map, Madrid in 1750, blue line, and San Ildefonso in 1777, red line, were all negotiated under strong geographical uncertainty, like the imaginary line between Javari and Madeira rivers, known as the Madeira-Javari line, highlighted in green. All of these negotiations include episodes of cartographic machination and secrecy. With ineffective presence in the Amazon regions, Spain eventually delegated to the Jesuit missions the control of indigenous peoples and territories. As a gold helmet, the missions had to protect Spanish Amazonian regions against permanent Portuguese advances. 19th century independent South American states inherited different interpretations of these former treaties and supported different visual and juridical arguments of national sovereignty claims and navigation rights. Let's see an example. In 1830, the project of territorial and political unity known as Great Colombia dissolved in three different national projects: Ecuador, New Granada, and Venezuela, each one with its own version of iutis possidetis for international and subnational territorial conflicts. Restrepo's map of Great Colombia before the dissolution sketches a political administrative harmony that never took place. This map should be understood as an intellectual desire of a nation-state with its coherent and defined internal and external territorial structure. The red line highlights Restrepo's understanding of Great Colombian borderlines with Brazil, according to his interpretation of the 1777 treaty. Meanwhile, Portuguese preference for 1750 treaty in defining Amazonian border was maintained on politics towards newly independent Spanish ex-colonies, as highlighted with the blue lines added to this Portuguese map of Brazil from 1821. This map was dedicated to Pedro de Alcântara, Prince of Brazil and son of Portugal's king. Pedro de Alcântara will proclaim Brazil's independence from Portugal in 1828 and crown himself as Pedro I, Emperor of Brazil. Brazil Empire will inherit Portugal's model of territorial expansion and commercial exploitation in the Amazon region. Brazil will develop effective territorial expansionist politics in the subcontinent. When we compare details of the territories between the Japura and Amazon rivers between the 1821 map and a later Brazilian map from 1828, we can see new territories added, blue lines highlight. The 1828 map seems to identify in unambiguous manners the river network, the topographic obstacles, and the purely artificial straight lines over empty-like territories. The 1828 map also cleans the territory from neighbors' country names, missionary presence, and Parima imaginary lake, visually stressing a better knowledge of this territory and presenting it as an open frontier. In fact, the map borderlines are presented as current borders, maybe suggesting new potential territorial annexations. Two, geopolitical shift in the Andean countries toward nationalization of the Amazon regions, commercial and ideological values in the nationalistic cartographies. Like the other Andean countries, New Granada and Bolivia initially inherited their colonial indifference for Amazonian regions, traditionally conceived as unknown countries inhabited by savages. See details, for example, from the 1843 Bolivian map. Disregard for Amazonian regions may explain the fact that both countries actually recognize Brazil's imperial territorial claim and borderlines in their first maps, as highlighted in blue. However, in the second half of the 19th century, Bolivia and New Granada experienced emerging nationalization interest for Amazonian territories, its resources, and the navigable network. This geopolitical shift implied new geographic interpretations of UT possibilities, like pushing up the Javari-Madera line in the 1859 Bolivian map, as well as some doses of cartographic aggressiveness, like New Granada map of 1852. That map declares territorial usurpation from Brazilians, where the 1847 map acknowledged Brazil claims. In general, we can notice that the Andean countries start to visually increase their Amazonian territorial pretensions in their new cartographic national body. Of course, this was done without any concern for local indigenous population or territorialities. It may be interesting to note that Bolivian, New Granadian, Ecuadorian, and Peruvian national maps of the mid-19th century are all published in places like Paris or New York, presumably both for technical reasons and for international diplomatic recognition.